Hello again, I'm Brandon Dawson, and this is The Distiller. My guest for this episode is Tamaya Dennard. In late 2017, Tamaya came pretty much out of nowhere to win a seat on the Cincinnati City Council. She placed 6th out of the 9 candidates elected with almost no budget, not running any TV advertising, and pretty much previously unknown on the political landscape. And lest you think this episode is just about Cincinnati, this is a story that's echoing U.S. politics across the board. As a gay African-American woman, Tamaya represents a combination of some of the most marginalized populations in our society. She also represents a combination of the populations most active in changing the status quo. And as we discussed, it may just be Black women who saved this country from destruction. Tamaya and I met at Wave Pool Gallery in Cincinnati's Camp Washington neighborhood, where owner Cal Curran showed us around the space, and we talked a little bit about the programs Wave Pool offers.
We're in an old firehouse in Camp Washington, and my husband and I started this space 3 years ago. We're a nonprofit art center. We really focus on experimental contemporary art that can be used as a catalyst for positive social change. So we take that pretty far. We have a gallery space, which is pretty traditional, but our residency program, we bring in artists from all over the world to live here and do projects with the community. So they've worked with the Correctional Center, with the Community Council, with the Urban Farm. We started a project next door called the Welcome Project, which is a collaboration between us and Heartfelt Tidbits, a refugee service organization, to basically work on entrepreneurial skills and crafting skills, and there will be food soon. So my belief is that contemporary art can be really experimental and really provocative, but also serve a greater good. And so that's what Wave Pool aims to do.
For more information on Wave Pool, check out wavepoolgallery.org, and thanks again to Cal for hosting us. And with that, we started our conversation by talking about Tamaya's recent Cincinnati City Council win. Tamaya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to Cal for opening up her space.
Yeah, definitely. When we first talked to you about coming on the podcast, the election hadn't happened yet.
No.
It was before the end of the year. It was, I guess, back in October and November. Things were looking good for you, but there was no certainty that you were going to win a seat on the city council. Turns out you came in 6th of 9 candidates, kind of surprised some people.
Yeah.
Like, you had a powerful candidacy. You put together a really nice campaign.
Thank you.
You and I talked a little bit before that, and I think, I didn't want to say, hey, it really seems like you're going to win, but I was doing everything I could, which I think everybody else was, to say, man, it looks really good. And do you feel like you shocked, maybe is a strong word? You certainly surprised some people with how many votes you got.
We definitely shocked some folks because we didn't have enough money to go on television, which is usually, people think, if you go on television because you can reach more people, you can certainly win. But our campaign, thanks to an amazing campaign team, showed that grassroots was where it was at. We knocked on over 34,000 doors, and that was the equalizer. So the money that it took to, go on to television, we didn't have it, but we definitely made it up for, interacting with voters in a lot of different ways, in very traditional ways, but also in a lot of non-traditional ways.
Right on. So for people that don't live in Cincinnati, for people that may be listening to this a year from now, we're talking about the 2017 Cincinnati City Council election. Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. And this is, we talked a little bit before we started recording, not a political podcast, a podcast about work. I would be interested in hearing that story from you, regardless of whether you had won. Yeah. I am super interested in hearing from you with your past, with everything that you've gone through, how you have ended up where you are. So while I'm glad you won, and I'm happy for you, super happy for you on a personal level, I'm no more or less interested in your story because you're on the city council. I think it adds an interesting element to what you're doing now and what we're going to be talking about. You started out, if I understand, you got a business degree from the University of Cincinnati. You started out in real estate, not in politics or public service.
Right. I worked I have 10 years of real estate experience. The last part of that was working at Duke Energy in the real estate department. And that was about 2010, 2011. Okay. And then met PG Sittenfeld, who was, he and I volunteered together at the Freestore Food Bank. They had a YP board. And I was making pretty good money at Duke, but I wasn't feeling satisfied in what I was doing. I started volunteering on his first campaign.
Okay.
we won, and then kind of the rest kind of dovetailed into enrolled into a career.
Right on. So that was going to be that's kind of the main question is, how do you go from deciding that you're going to work in real estate to a really powerful, now developing career? Because you worked for PG on his initial city council campaign.
Yeah.
You worked with him on his, what I hope is his first Senate campaign and not his last Senate campaign. And then actually became a member of his staff.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, what you did in that staff.
Well, I always was interested, no matter what I was doing, I was always interested in social change. A lot of it had to do with how I grew up. I grew up here in Cincinnati, born and raised. My mom raised me and my two brothers, and we were the recipients of a lot of, public assistance. We were the recipient of, free health clinics, and for me, it wasn't just about taking advantage of that. It was making sure that those things were in place for other people. So while politics wasn't always my career, I always knew that those things need to be in place. I don't know if I would be a Cincinnati City Council member had it not been for those safety nets. So for people who don't think that safety nets matter, or don't think you should fund health clinics, or don't think that you should be funding food stamps and programs and free programs for young people, I am saying, here that, firsthand that these programs work. So for me, it wasn't just about, hey, let's switch careers. It was about, I'm here and I want to not necessarily give back, because a lot of people say that, but I wanted to demonstrate and show what it meant to be the embodiment for those things to come together, for those systems to work. My mom still, works. She's been at the same place for 27 years. She stands on her feet. Right now, the place that she works now was the only place that offered her a job the last time she got out of jail. They gave her an opportunity, and she's been there ever since. So
27 years, wow.
My story is not it's not actually it's common, but for a lot of people who come from where I come from stop short of getting involved in politics.
Yeah.
And we can talk about why that is. There's a lot of reasons why, but a lot of times people don't look at politics and they don't see themselves. And so I wanted to do this so that people could actually see themselves and see someone who came from the same places that they come from. I don't have a political name. There are political names here in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So another reason why we shock people, because we kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't have a household name. Tamaya Dennard isn't something that rolls off the tongue very readily in Cincinnati.
You didn't have a household name. You're
but I'm
rapidly
hoping to change
developing
that,
one.
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all of that points to what I'm sort of most excited to talk to you about, because when people talk about work, typically it's a couple of different things they're talking about. They're talking about, first of all, the economic realities. People think of work, as I got to pay the bills. And then once you get sort of on that hierarchy of needs, once you feel like you have whatever allows you to do that, then maybe people get to start talking about meaning and purpose and all of that. But for a lot of people, that's a pretty privileged discussion. You came from, there are other interviews, your history, you've talked about your mom had spent some time in prison. And one of the things that you said is that you held on to, she told you, pay attention to what could be, or look at what could be and not what is.
Yeah.
I'm super interested in knowing why that resonated with you, because that's a lot of parents might say that to their kids. A lot of kids might not hear it or might not grab onto it. Coming from, you've said, I think in another interview that I read, you said you literally came from nothing. You've dealt with, people talk about childhood poverty, just poverty. And you came from a really troubled household where your mom, as you said, was sort of in and out. Why did you grab hold of that message in a way that it actually inspired you to do something else?
I would say that my mom, she did a heck of a job raising me. My mom is amazing. And what I had difficulty with when I was younger is reconciling the fact that you're always told that bad people go to jail. But I knew my mom wasn't a bad person, and she did a heck of a job raising me. But so she did the very best job that she could. And for me, this whole thing has been about mission and where it kind of takes you. And, when I started out working in politics as a career, after PG won the first election, he had offered me a job. I told him no. And
why?
Because I was making a lot of money at Duke, and he showed me what the salary would be at Cincinnati. I was like, I've been poor my whole life. I don't really want to do that again.
Yeah.
But I changed my mind, and by the time I changed my mind, he only had $14,000 left in his budget for staff at City Hall.
So it was even less than what he originally showed you.
It was way less than he originally offered, but I took it. Because on the course of the campaign, I couldn't get away from the fact that we were talking to people in a way that they hadn't been spoken to traditionally. Politics had become so transactional that I really wanted to change it. And one thing that I kept going back to is, as much as I could stay behind the scenes and be an operative, ultimately what I understood is that you have to be in the room to change the room. And so if I don't get in there, it's kind of like if not me, who type deal. And that's really what it boiled down to for me. So, while I did have some trouble spots in my childhood, overall, I had an amazing childhood, and I really wanted to, again, just show. I remember the year that PG jumped into the race. Just that earlier, a few months before that, City Council had voted to close the health clinics in Cincinnati, and that really resonated with me because that's where I went for my physicals and my checkups and things like that. So I had to jump in there because, people can advocate for health clinics, and that's great, but people who are most impacted by something have to be the ones that help you design your way out of something. And so that's my personal belief, that's my personal philosophy. But one thing about the process of running for office is that it's one that begs so much privilege that oftentimes people are trying to solve things that they've never actually experienced themselves. And so that's another thing I felt was a differentiator for me and other candidates. Even though their hearts are in the right place, they don't really know what it's like. And so ultimately you end up with a lot of Band-Aid solutions because they don't really know what's really happening. And so when I thought about the mission, or I like to call it my journey, making $14,000 wasn't something that, was a part of that initially, but it was the smartest and dumbest thing I've done to get to this point.
One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is it seems like there is a rising tide of cultural awareness in a lot of issues of inequality. The day that we're recording this podcast on, I think the Golden Globes are tonight, and there's a big movement around people wearing black to raise awareness for the Time's Up movement, which is sort of an extension of like the Me Too movement that's coming out, and a lot of awareness of gender inequality issues, and there's great stuff going on. My point is that for the people who need to hear that most, the people who generally run and hold the positions, run for office and hold the positions of power, the education that is necessary in order to get people culturally to understand what it takes to overcome what you have overcome is a difficult process. It's a difficult question to ask, even for me to frame that question for you. Like, I want to know, typically I ask people on this podcast, tell me what you do for work. Tell me what your day is like. I know what your job title is. For you, part of what I want to understand is I know that I have very little capacity to understand the challenges that you faced to come from where you have come to where you are. And I want to know more about that. Like, I literally want to know, in terms of if how do I say this? Just being real honest. Like, if you and I had come from different places because of who we are, society would have given me advantages that it didn't give to you.
Absolutely.
That I would have been completely unaware of, no matter how much I try to come up with them on my own. I kind of want to know, for the listeners and for myself, like, I want to get a vision into what it has taken for you to overcome all of that stuff that people generally don't even know that you had to face.
It actually becomes almost subconscious because I'm so used to dealing with it. I've never not dealt with it. Even talking about the campaign, we raised a good amount of money, but African American women don't generally raise money running for office. That's because we don't have the social capital, the network to do so. So for me, I can't tell you how do you become aware. Only thing I can say is listen, be open to understanding that there's varying degrees of privilege. What I try to do in talking about that, because there's privilege that you have, but I also understand there's privilege that I have as well. Even though, my mom was locked up, I still have my grandmother. There are still plenty of people who their parents go to jail or prison and they don't have anybody. So I always try to recognize what my privilege is. At the same time, I'm always looking to educate. When we did our swearing in this week, I had my red folding chair.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
And that was something that, for me, a lot of people, and I took advantage of the moment. I was in a room with people, some of whom knew who I was, some didn't. And I talked about, when you're the majority in the room, if everybody in the room is white, that's a problem. And so I try to educate, not berate or beat people over the head with it, because they're going to cut you off and not listen. But if I go into a room and it's full of people. Let's say I'm going to Chamber of Commerce, and I know just, history tells me that room is also going to be white men. Just because, I have to talk about privilege, but I don't lead with that, because if I lead with that, even though it's true, I can't lead with it, because the room will not listen to what I have to say.
Yeah.
And so that's why I try to take advantage to educate. And at the same time, I'm always trying to be educated and learn, because we've all evolved in terms of our social awareness and our social consciousness. But my goal is always to educate. So I tell people all the time, I'm a social justice warrior. I love a good protest. But at the end of the day, is your goal to demonize, or is your goal to move the ball forward? Is it to move the needle? And so if your goal is to move the ball forward or move the needle, then you are going to take a stance of education, as opposed to just, insults and telling people, they're racist or they're bigots or whatever. So I think a lot about, my approach and, how I say things, when I say things, and the way I deliver things.
In the things that you've done, because that's not going to be only true of your political career. That had to have been true of educational career, getting your initial jobs at Duke Energy. Has it escalated, or is it? You said it's sort of like, and I understand that. Like you said, it's basically just part of your process right now. It's just the landscape that you deal with.
It's all I know.
Yeah,
so at this
right.
point, I'm happy with the fact that people are open to learning more. You talked a little bit earlier about the Me Too movement and people wearing black, but 3 or 4 years ago we were dealing with Oscar So White. So it's just there's these movements to really change. I mean, the privilege that people don't, when they hear the word privilege, they automatically think that they didn't work hard, or someone's trying to take something from them, and that's not what privilege is. I mean, we're privileged in so many different ways. So it's about educating people. I'm black, I'm a woman, I'm gay, I come from a really diverse background, poverty. So there's a lot of intersections, a lot of identities I hold. And so I always try to give grace when I'm interacting with people, because they may not have interacted with people who are like me. Cincinnati is, I think, the 5th most segregated city in the country, which is crazy to think about, but it's true. So I always say that you may not be responsible for what you don't know prior to, but you have to be open to different experiences and learn about different people. That doesn't mean that you're going to be fully aware and you're going to be woke within 5 minutes, but you have to be open to the process of learning that you are privileged and embracing and understanding what your privilege is. And I try to do that every day in my space. Like, I've not been impoverished for a while now, but I still recognize that I once was, but I'm not anymore. So even if I'm trying to design something, think about something that has to do with people who are experiencing poverty, I don't try to design it, because I haven't been impoverished for a while. So I kind of know what that's like, but kind of sort of not. But I want to be aware of my own positionality as it pertains to these spaces. And I think you just have to constantly be honest with yourself as you go along.
That's so interesting. I mean, even everything that you've come from, that you know enough in that to say, I'm not there, I'm not the one who should speak to that solution right now. I got to pull people into the room who are there.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, I think that's maybe a viewpoint that only comes from having had people make decisions for you when you weren't in the room for so long, that you know how important it is.
You think about the systemic and institutional racism that we have here, and how we have like a lot of things that just get passed down, and systems that are in place that really hold people down. So we have processes that don't give people dignity. I've been subject to all those things. My mom and I, we've been in line for food stamps. I mean, we stood in line for a long time. We get to the front and we find out we don't have what we need. And when you experience these things, to me, struggle has been my best education. And I know that I'm not saying everybody should struggle, but it's really opened my eyes. And constantly, that's why I'm constantly trying to get better and learn about how other people are, what they're going through, and how I can be helpful, but not in a savior type of way, but understanding that our liberation, we're all tied together through that. And so if you take the mode of connection as opposed to being a savior, it changes things for people as well.
Was that, you said that you were sort of always, you volunteering for PG's campaign and then you ended up doing what you're doing now was not a departure for you. It wasn't like when you were at Duke Energy, you were just completely ignoring social issues.
No.
And then all of a sudden you had some woke moment and you were like, okay, I'm going to devote my life to it. You were always doing that stuff.
For sure.
What did that look like for you? You talked about marching and things like that, but how was that different for you now than it is then? What were the struggles that were involved in getting and keeping and being taken seriously at that job different than they are in the same questions now?
I mean, there's some similarity. As a black woman, by default, you're always, not always, I shouldn't speak in absolutes, you're almost always assumed to know less than people in the room. That happened at Duke Energy. That happened, it happens in politics. Even working as PG's chief of staff, people would come into the office and I handled the schedule. People would come in and they would automatically start, they would assume I was just there to answer the phone. They would start talking to, one of my colleagues, white male, in the room, and I would listen to everything they had to say, and then I would make them repeat everything they had to say because I wouldn't stop. I'm just let them go on and then have them repeat everything and act like I didn't hear. So sometimes I had fun with it.
Yeah.
And so I would love those type of moments, but it's difficulty and the weight of being both black and being a woman. Is something that I think is a play for colored girls that consider suicide when the rainbow isn't enough. And one of the quotes is, being black and being a woman is a metaphysical dilemma I've yet to conquer. And that's one of my favorite quotes because it's true. I mean, it's just ongoing. And even when we think about the Me Too movement, the woman who started the Me Too movement was a black woman, and she didn't even make the cover of the magazine. Right. So there's this constant, battle just for dignity and taking your place. And so it's been, while we're in the era of Trump, which is a very disgusting human being, but at the same time, it's a weird time in our society because the level of consciousness for a lot of people has been raised because of him and because of, they're so, not for everybody, but a lot of people are like, I'm so sad that he's the president. What can I do to be helpful? Yeah. They're open to learning. So it's a very weird and strange time. But I say all that to say that black women in politics, we've been the most faithful and largest voting demographic for the Democratic Party, in this country really, but the Democratic Party specifically for a long time. And so people are just starting to recognize that after a long time, and that's even why I decided to get in politics in the first place. Yeah. So it's interesting, like with the victory of Jones down in Alabama.
I was going to bring that up, yeah. That was all black women. Black
women, but we knew that all along. I mean, you think about the election of Donald Trump where 98% of black women voted for Hillary Clinton as opposed to 56% of white women who voted against their own interests.
Right.
So black women have been like the moral consciousness for this country for a long time, and we're starting to finally get recognized, but not in the way that we should, because it's like, oh yeah, black women, but they stop quite short of giving us promotions.
Giving you the positions of power to make the decisions.
Exactly. We've shown that we are solid decision makers. I mean, not in a monolithic way, but by and large, we're, in general, we're a strong, smart, we're the most educated group too in terms of like percentage of having college degrees, but we just stopped short of handing over the reins to help make those decisions. So I think about that, and you talk about my everyday. That's something I've only been at City Hall for a few days, but that's something I think about every day when I go into City Hall. Even how I, put my staff together is mostly women, very purposely.
What is the makeup of the City Council in Cincinnati right now?
So it's very cool. It's very cool and not so cool in some ways. There's 5 of us who are millennials, which is really nice to think about. I think Greg, I give him a hard time. He's 41, but I still pull him into the millennial space. So we have 5 millennials. We have 2 women, which I think is not good considering that we're 50% of the population. Yeah. So 2 women, me and Amy Murray, and then there are. It's me, Jeff Pastor, Wendell Young, and Christopher Smitherman. There's 4 African Americans on council. So in the breakdown, party-wise, is there's 6 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 3 Republicans essentially, but 2 Republicans and 1 independent.
How representative is that mix of the population in Cincinnati right now?
Not very. I think we need more women on council for sure. I think we need people with more diverse backgrounds. I really, again, going back to the process of running for office, you have to have a lot of money to run for office. Yeah. And the reason I was able to do this is recognizing my privilege of having a job at Design Impact who really embraced and pushed me to do this. So I had a job that welcomed this. I have a partner who makes good money so that when I couldn't work, she paid all the bills. I don't have any children. So there's a lot of privilege that I had to even do this. So I would love to see more diversity, even not just color, but diversity of experiences and more people who've experienced poverty like me, and even in the throes of it right now to run for office. But like I said, I wish politics weren't so entrenched with money. We had to raise $125,000, which is unheard of for a first-time African-American candidate. And the thing I'm most proud of is that 60% of our donors have never given to anybody. I was a first-time contribution for a lot of folks. But I would like to see that happen, and I would love to see more neighborhoods represented. Like, I think I'm the first person, I think, ever who's lived in Camp Washington to be elected to City Council, which I'm proud of, but there's a lot of other communities who need representation because they're all at-large seats, but we have too many council members that live downtown or live in Hyde Park or Mount Lookout. I would like to see some other communities represented.
Yeah. What do you do about that? Obviously there's a million things you could, now that you're on the city council, and it's your job to, to some degree to represent a broader constituency. I guess in one sense, like what are your issues? What is your platform issues? But then day to day, like what do you do to make it more possible for people like you to be on council in the future?
Great question. So on the micro level, how do I leverage my privilege? How do I leverage my networks to do that? And I've already kind of started doing that. I'm creating later this year kind of I don't know what to call it quite yet, but basically I want to train other women to run for office. What I found was that there's a lot of women who have great ideas. They are really smart. They really have the heart for this, but they don't understand how politics work, and that's the unfortunate part for me. I had privilege in that I worked in this space before, so I knew how to raise money. I knew how to create a campaign plan. I knew about strategies, and for a lot of people who are not in the space, they can't do that. So I want to leverage my knowledge and my network to help make that happen. On more of a macro level, I think it's engaging in community and educating and helping people understand more what City Council does. So one of my ideas in terms of my platform is taking City Council to more communities. So over the course of our 4-year term, I want to have at least one full council meeting in every single community. I think for a lot of people, they don't know all the functions of City Hall. I had a lot of my friends who, they voted, they're same age as me, mid-late 30s. They've voted in presidential elections, but a lot of them said, this is the first time I've ever voted in a local election is because of you. So it's not that they're not engaged, it's just they don't really understand or make the connection. So for me, it's a lot of education and connecting people and empowering those communities to know that they have representation. That's a big thing for me, is engaging with communities who, quite frankly, have been left behind. Right now in Cincinnati, depending on where you live, your life expectancy is longer or shorter. And those are the communities who don't have the resources that they need to thrive. So part of my job and part of my mission is to help those communities connect to city resources, not necessarily dollars, although that's a huge part of it. They have to have capital, but connect them to how the city runs and how the city works so that they can at least have their interest piqued and be more engaged.
Think back a little bit to like when you were a kid, high school, when you're going to college or whatever. If you talked to that version of Tamaya right now, would you be surprised of where you are and what your path has ended up at so far?
A little. I've always been, I remember, this sounds really corny, but I remember being in 4th grade and elected to student council. Yeah. And that was really big for me. I told my mom I wanted to run for student council, and she was just like, okay, I don't know what that means, but, go for it. And so early on, I kind of caught the leadership bug. Yeah. So there was, at some point, I look back on my yearbook, and I had some of my classmates write that I was going to be the first, black woman president. Some said the first black president.
Plenty of time left.
Obama beat me to the first black president, but there's still hope for me in the women's space. Oh, yeah. But so some things surprised me, but not everything. The fact that I am, I've evolved in my thinking. I used to not be as conscious as I am about a lot of things. So there's, and my confidence, I think, has grown. I wasn't always confident when I was younger. Confidence is everything. And I don't know what happened when I turned 26, but I used to think that, I didn't want to be mean. And so I learned when I was about 26 years old that you can be assertive without being mean. So one of the first things that people will say about me is that they'll say I'm nice. And I like that. Initially, I was like, I don't want to be seen as a mean person. But one thing somebody taught me, Mama Sittenfeld, she said, it's nice to be important, but it's important to be nice. Wow. So that's something I think about all the time. So even in my interactions and when I don't agree with someone, when I disagree, I always try to be kind. And so I'm happy about that. And want always to keep that no matter what, because sometimes it's not easy to do when you work in politics. You get trolls, but above all, always be kind. So there's certain parts of my life that surprise me, but some that don't. I fully expected to succeed and fully expected to do well. I just thought maybe I'd be like I didn't think it was going to be in politics necessarily. In 2008, I kind of got bit by the Obama bug and kind of really, I always loved politics, but I really doubled down on my love for politics.
Right on. Because of him, or because of just like, I mean, was it something he said, or was it just everything that was in the water at the time?
I think it was a little bit of both. Like I remember, like I at that point when Obama was elected the first time, I never contributed to a political campaign before. I was in my mid-20s, late 20s, and I had never donated to a campaign before. I never volunteered for a campaign before. I always read, but actually taking the next step to actually getting involved. So I was knocking on doors for him. I was not contributing a whole lot of money. It was $25 a month, but it was like, that was huge for me.
Yeah.
And he made that $25 feel like it was like the most, the biggest gift in the world, which was huge for me.
Right.
So, yeah, things that he said, like, we're the change that we've been waiting for, and being inspired by his speech at the DNC in 2004. And then I remember even on the campaign trail when I grew weary and tired and didn't feel like I wanted to knock any more doors, I still go back to this day. About once or twice a month, I listen to his speech after his win at the Iowa caucus. That kind of gives me life someday. So, yeah, that definitely, it was stuff in the water, but then also after he was elected, there were more black commentators on television. There were more black political pundits on television. And even after he's gone, because initially they just had them on there talking about Obama, but now that he's not in office anymore, they're still on there. And I think that's definitely a direct effect of Barack Obama.
As you look forward at politics, I mean, it's interesting. I didn't really plan to ask you this, but like thinking ahead, I think it was your comment about being the first black female president, which my money's on you if it's on anybody. But there's a lot of people who, and I think this goes across racial and economic divides, who have removed themselves from the process because they say it's all messed up. There's nobody in there who's not in there for the money or for the power. If there's anybody who puts the lie to that, it's you and what you bring to the table. But I mean, as you look forward and what you've learned, Cincinnati city politics are no different from that. I don't want to get into it and all of that, but
no, I don't want to either.
There's people with great hearts who are doing good things on one side, who on the other side are being accused from people or of being too much cronyism. And then you get to the point where even people have said about Obama, as great as he was at a lot of stuff, there's no way that you can get to that level in political discourse without being compromised on some level. Like, what do you think about all of that, and what do you think about that as you sort of envision and map out a future for yourself?
The only thing I think about every day is how do I show up as my best self, and that's what I can focus on. And so, I agree. There's a lot of that kind of talk with folks, but I got into this to make change, to make a difference, and I think even thinking about our campaign. So not to keep going back to the campaign, but. Yeah. We were the most endorsed candidate on the campaign, and while having the most endorsements is really cool, I think more importantly for us is the broad reach of our campaign. So we had really left-leaning organizations like Our Revolution. I was the only nationally endorsed Our Revolution candidate in Cincinnati, and I can tell you that a lot of the council members that are serving with me applied for that, but I was the only one that came out of that.
Awesome.
At the same time, I also was in one of the Chamber of Commerce's top 9. And one thing I always promise myself and my team is that we're going to be the same person in every single room with everybody. And that's what I can't control. I don't say different things to different people. I don't, do one thing on one side and do another. That's what I can't control, and that's what I'll always continue to do. Will I make mistakes? Of course. Will I bump my head a few times? I certainly will, but one thing that no one will ever be able to question about me is my authenticity and my desire to make things right for everybody. So there is a lot of, entrenched partisan relationships here in Cincinnati, but my goal is to make, work for everyone. So if I'm making a decision, you better believe I'm making a decision based on what I believe and from my perch, and it's going to be informed because I'm not an expert. So one thing I pride myself on is I'm always trying to okay, what's going on? Who are the experts in this space? I'm not a subject matter expert, but I always want to make the best decision, and those decisions are going to be informed by the people who are impacted. So I don't know how far I'll go in politics. I told my team that, we might have a really good one term, and I'm okay with that if we really get some things done.
Make the most of it.
Yeah, we're going to make the most out of it, but you better believe that this 4-year term that Cincinnatians have given to me, I don't take it lightly, and we're going to make some things happen. Last night, Greg and I we wrote down our list of policy wishes, the things that we want to get done. Some of them are long-term, like 4 years. Some of them can be in the next 6 months. But I'm there to work and move the needle. And when there's discourse at City Hall, the people who suffer the most aren't the people at City Hall. It's the people who are being left out of the process. So I can't lose sight of that. I won't lose sight of that. Every day I look at my mom, I won't lose sight of that. She doesn't know when she can retire, because, she doesn't have the money to retire. And we have discussions to this day about making sure that her rent's paid. So I'm not too far removed from, struggle.
Yep.
So I think, not that I want my mom to struggle or anything like that, but as long as I'm having those conversations with her, as long as I'm looking her in the eye and I'm, getting up in the mirror and looking myself in the eye, in the mirror, I have to make sure that I'm doing this for the right reason. The very moment I feel like I'm not doing this for the right reason, the moment I feel like I'm not serving people the way they should be served, is the moment that I don't work in politics anymore, and I promise that.
Tell me, we got a little bit of time left, and I kind of want to ask you the question that I ask everybody, because I'm still fascinated by that. Tell me about your days right now. So you and I met the first time at Design Impact, which, if people don't know, is an amazing organization in Cincinnati that they should look up, that does great work. And
Absolutely.
as you said, kind of made space for and facilitated your campaign and all of that. You were just sworn in how many days ago?
4 days ago, 5 days ago.
Okay, so this is super recent. You're right in the middle of a huge transition in your working and professional life.
Yeah.
Tell me, like, nuts and bolts. What are you doing? What are your days? I would imagine when we scheduled this, like we said, we started talking before you won. And part of me is a little bit surprised that you still have the time to do it, because I would imagine there's a million things going on for you right now. So tell me a little about what's going on in your life.
It's a little overwhelming, I'll be honest with you. The night that we won, I had people at our party scheduling meetings and, telling me the things that they wanted me. I mean, literally after
Starting gun goes off.
Exactly. So at that moment after my speech, someone pulled me in the corner. I was like, okay, I need you to do these things. It's like, I'll be honest with you, this week has been slightly overwhelming. On Thursday, I went to work at DI. So I'm still keeping my job in a limited way. I'll be working a few hours a month.
Right on.
But I really love what I do, and I'm blessed to work with such amazing folks. So I'm going to keep my job. After the swearing in, the very first day at City Hall was transition stuff, getting our computers hooked up and ordering our business cards, and we've already started handling constituent issues. So that's been pretty cool. So it's every day I'm either giving speeches or I'm setting up meetings to learn more about something. I have a committee that I'm chairing is called Equity, Inclusion, Youth in the Arts. So it's formerly the Human Services Committee. I didn't like the name Human Services, so I changed it. And we included some things. We changed a few things. We added inclusion to it. We added LGBT issues. Refugees and immigrants are also added into that. So I'm learning a lot right now. There's some things I know a lot about. There's some things I don't know a lot about. Affordable housing is also in there, and homelessness. So there's a lot happening in our city right now. So I'm in the mode right now where I have 4 to 5 meetings. I've learned that 5 meetings a day are about my breaking point. I can't take in more information beyond that. I learned that the other day. My chief of staff looked at me and she said, "You hit your capacity?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, I hit my
Meeting
capacity."
number 6, you just...
Yeah, it's different when you're like having breakfast meeting, but when you're actually like, I'm learning and
Yeah.
taking in information, about 5 meetings a day are my capacity. I had a great meeting the other day with Chief Isaac, Cincinnati Police Department chief, and learning more about that. I'm very much into social justice, and I'm an unapologetically Black Lives Matter candidate. So there's some issues I have with the police department and how they do work, but I've never been a police officer, so I have to learn about their process. And any ideas I have, they would have to be engaged. So I'm a believer that whether I'm in your space or not, or whether I'm not a police officer, I respect the job that they do. They do a difficult job. But if I'm going to make change, or if I have proposals to make change, they have to be informed and be a part of that. So that's what my weeks are like, my days are like right now. A lot of meetings. And also, we've committed to stay engaged with the community. So one thing I ran on was, I'm here now, but after I get elected, I'm not going to disappear. So trying to mix the meetings where we're learning, but also the meetings where we're engaged. And like I said, giving a lot of speeches and going places and sitting down with folks. And I tell people all the time, if you invite me to your space, I don't have to give a speech. I'm very good to just sit back and just be there. So I think they have to unlearn that too about me. I'm a different kind of politician. I don't have to always be the person that's talking. I like to learn. So that's what it's like now. I don't know what next week will bring, I'll be honest with you. But what I do want to do is I've taken those policy ideas and they're going to be front and center on my wall every day. So no matter how the day pulls me, no matter how the day goes, I'm going to do something that gets me closer to accomplishing our policy goals. Every day I commit to doing that, no matter what, how crazy or where the day brings me. So one of the things I've learned is I got to drive the day. I can't let the day drive me. I'm learning that fast because it's been driving me, and I say, hold on, I got to pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, stay in control a little bit, keep it in front of you.
It's a lot. I mean, because the campaign was tough, but this is really where the hard work starts. I mean, there's a lot of the learnings I'm talking about, but there's the tactical stuff. I worked at City Hall before, but learning where to go when you have an idea. How does this policy get from being something on my notebook to actually becoming a law and policy? How do you work with your colleagues to make that happen? Not just your council colleagues, but the administration, the city manager, the law department.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are moving parts that are happening at one time. And then how do I also become engaged? I've been in Kent, Washington for about 18 months now, so I haven't lived here very long. And there's a lot of things I don't know about Kent, Washington. So I don't want to be in Hyde Park and in College Hill when I don't know Cal and the amazing work that's happening at the Wave Pool Gallery. So there's a lot of things happening at the same time, but I'm grateful for it all. I remember when I prayed for days like this, so I'm happy.
Right on. And you don't drink coffee?
I don't drink coffee. I don't need to drink coffee. I would be bouncing off the walls if I had coffee. You wouldn't like me if I had coffee.
What of the stuff that you've done before, and I'm as far back as you want to go, from your childhood, from educational experiences, your business degree at UC, the international travel abroad and study work that you did, your time at Duke Energy, what has prepared you most for the different aspects of at least what you know the job to be right now?
I think everything. It sounds crazy, but I think if I had to pinpoint one thing, it's experiencing, difficulty growing up, either economical or, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm one of those people who think that everything happens for a reason. And so, even when you experience something bad, there's a lesson to be learned there. So, when I'm I was just at a community action agency, and there was a group of young people in a program that they were just kind of rejected. They didn't, a lot of them didn't finish high school. The commencement ceremony where I spoke was the only commencement ceremony that they'll have. While I did well in school, a lot of their struggles were struggles that I shared at one point. I had teachers who told me I wasn't going to amount to anything.
Have you written all them since you?
I have, just because I'm petty. I have done that. I actually have one of my teachers who told me I wasn't going to amount to anything when I was 40 under 40 in a business career. I actually sent her a copy of it.
Good for you.
Just to let her know.
That's fantastic. Just
because I still have my petty ways, but
I love it.
But I do a lot of the struggle that I've had, a lot of things that I've experienced. They all got me here. Working at Duke, and I think that's why I got a high rating from the Chamber of Commerce. They even know it. They said it to me. We know you're not going to be on our side every time, and they're right about that. But they know I'm going to be thoughtful. Yeah. Having this the endorsement from the Association of Social Workers, they understand that I'm going to make the best decisions for people who are who people call the least of us. But for me, it's again understand that who I am at different parts of my journey. I represent all those folks. So I'm never going to lose sight of that. I remember being the person I remember when a few years ago when I was trying to write to a lot of people it's probably like 7 years ago, and I was interested in joining a lot of programs here in Cincinnati. People didn't write me back, they didn't email me back. Those same people now are want to grab meetings with me, want to grab lunch. So I am very, very conscious to try to make sure I answer every single email, every single phone call. People who people won't meet with, I'll meet with them. People, you'll never have difficulty having a meeting with me, one, because it's the right thing to do, but two, because I remember what it's like to not have your phone calls returned, and people waiting for you to be somebody. So all those things I take into account every day. So, and being accessible is really important to me because of that.
Yeah.
So everything has contributed to, the fullness and the wholeness that I am now, and just making sure I always kind of tap into that. A lot of times people say, well, you can't, we were talking a little bit about the hierarchy. Well, you can't, self-actualize until you have your physiological needs met. Well, sometimes that's not true. People need to have their souls fed. Even if they can't eat, even if they are having difficulty putting food on the table, they still need their souls fed. I know that because I was that person. There is a hierarchy, but sometimes those hierarchies are sometimes viewed through like the social and middle class norms, and not really understanding what everyday people go through. So I'm a culmination of all those things, and I remind myself of that every day. I'm always going to be that person, those people.
You're somebody who's gone from, a lot of people think about, I want to do meaningful work. I'm stuck in a corporate job or a dead-end job. I want to find something that really fulfills my passion. You've made a transition now, and it came at a cost.
Yes, it did.
That $14,000 was difficult to look at the start.
It was, absolutely.
How do you think about work? Has that transition changed how you, and I mean that in terms of like, work can mean different things to people. It can mean vocation. It can mean your job and how you pay the bills. It can mean your life's work and the work that you bring your energy to. Like, what does that word mean for you right now, and how has it changed over the last few years?
It used to mean, how do I put food on the table? It used to mean like just getting up and doing something and going someplace and then coming home, waking up to buy the food, to get the energy to dig the ditch, to get up and buy the food, to dig the ditch. That's kind of how I thought about it before. But I think for me now, it's more like I'm thinking about mission and purpose more so than work. And wherever that mission or purpose leads me, I didn't set out necessarily to run for office. That was kind of where it led me, because I worked in politics and I saw how people in the African American community were treated by politicians in a really transactional way, and people in general, but particularly African American community. So I wanted to show what that could look like. Mm-hmm. So wherever my mission is to make sure that no matter who you are, who you love, where you live, what your race is, what your religion is, if you have a religion, that you are respected and valued, and wherever that takes me is where I'm willing to go. That's where my work is.
Excellent. Tamaya Dennard, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been exciting watching what's happened just in the past few months, watching your campaign. I can't wait to see what comes from your time in office, and I really appreciate, with all that's going on in your life right now, you taking the time to hang out with us for a little while.
Thank you for having me.
This episode of the Distiller Podcast was recorded live at Wavepool Gallery, a contemporary art fulfillment center at 2940 Coleraine Avenue in Camp Washington in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thanks again to Tamaya Dennard for joining us on the show. It really was an honor, and we're excited to see not only what Tamaya does on the council in coming months and years, but what she does in a political career that's obviously just getting started. Check out this episode's page at thedistillerpodcast.com for links to Tamaya's website, social media pages, so you can keep in touch with her. And we've also linked to Design Impact, where Tamaya and I first met. Check out the work they're doing, not just in Cincinnati, but around the country, to address problems of inequality in some really innovative ways. Special thanks again to Cal Curran of Wavepool as well for hosting us. Stop by Wavepool and check out all they're doing, including the gallery, studio spaces, and they actually even have a residency program there, meaning that artists live and work on site. It's really cool. Go to wavepoolgallery.org to learn more, or find that link on our website as well. The Distiller is produced, recorded, and hosted by me, Brandon Dawson, with co-production and booking from Terry Heist. We're mixed by Justin Golden. Our logo was designed by Scott Ryan, and videos by Mike Helm. You can find The Distiller on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also download episodes, find links and info, including photos of the guests and locations, and information on how to get in touch with us at thedistillerpodcast.com. You can suggest people you think should be on the show to talk about their search for meaningful work, or you can let us know if you think there's somewhere interesting we should record the show, or something interesting we should drink while doing it. It's all at thedistillerpodcast.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.